Macbeth by William Shakespeare. Once, there was a province governor named Macbeth who lived in Scotland while King Duncan was in charge. Macbeth was a brave and respected leader known for winning battles. One day, after a successful fight, Macbeth and his friend Banquo came across 3 strange female figures on a lonely heath. These figures looked like women but had weird features like beards and a spooky appearance. When Macbeth went closer, the strange figures motioned for him to be quiet by putting their fingers on their lips. The first figure called him the Governor of Glamis, which was Macbeth's current title. It didn't surprise him. Then the second figure called him the Governor of Cawdor, a title that Macbeth didn't have now. This amazed him. Finally, the third figure said that Macbeth would become the future king of Scotland. The figures circled and pointed to Banquo, Macbeth's friend, and said that he shall become the father of future kings. Macbeth was shocked and confused by these predictions because he was only the governor of Glamis, not the governor of Cawdor. He also knew that the king's sons were next in line for the throne. When Macbeth tried to ask more, the figures suddenly vanished into thin air, showing their true magical nature. Just as Macbeth and Banquo were trying to understand what had happened, messengers arrived from the king. They told Macbeth that he had been made the governor of Cawdor, which matched the witch's prophecy. Macbeth was amazed by this supernatural event and started to think that maybe the witch's third prediction could also come true. Returning to his castle, Macbeth shared the witch's prophecy with his wife, Lady Macbeth. She was ambitious and didn't care about right or wrong as long as they could gain power and become important. Lady Macbeth urged Macbeth, who felt guilty and unsure about committing murder, to believe that killing the king was necessary to achieve their ambitions. During that time, King Duncan decided to visit Macbeth's castle with his sons, Malcolm and Denalban, and some nobles. The castle was in a beautiful location with fresh air and luxurious. Before going to bed, the king sent a valuable diamond to Lady Macbeth to show his appreciation. Lady Macbeth was very happy with the king's kindness. The king went to his bedroom early in the evening. 2 soldier attendants slept in the same room as the king as usual. In the middle of the night, when it was quiet and only bad people and murderers were awake, Lady Macbeth woke up to plan the king's murder. She was afraid that her husband, Macbeth, wouldn't have the determination to do what was needed. Lady Macbeth took a dagger and went to the king's bed. But when she saw the king's face, it reminded her of her own father. She couldn't go through with the plan. She returned to Macbeth, who was also having second thoughts about the murder because of his moral concerns. He thought about reasons not to do it, like his close relationship with the king and the king's good qualities. He realized that killing King Duncan would damage his own reputation and the honor he had earned through the king's favor. However, Lady Macbeth was determined to carry out the evil plan. She used persuasive words to convince Macbeth that the murder was easy to do and would give them ultimate power and control. She insulted him for changing his mind and accused him of being fickle and cowardly. Lady Macbeth even said that if she had promised to do it, she would have killed her own baby, who was breastfeeding and smiling at her. She suggested that they could blame the murder on the drunken and sleepy attendants. With her persuasive words, she scolded him for being indecisive and encouraged him to regain the courage needed for the bloody task. Armed with a dagger, Macbeth quietly went to the room where Duncan was sleeping. As he walked, he thought he saw another dagger in the air with drops of blood on the blade and tip. But when he tried to grab it, he realized it was just a figment of his feverish and overwhelmed mind, a creation of the task he was about to do. Shaking off this fear, he entered the king's room and quickly killed him with one stab of his dagger. Right after committing the murder, one of the attendants sleeping in the room laughed in his sleep, while the other shouted, "Murder!" This momentary disturbance woke both of the soldier attendants up, but after saying a short prayer, one of them said, "God bless us," and the other responded with "Amen." Then they went back to sleep. Macbeth, who was listening to them, tried to say amen when the attendant said, "God bless us." But despite desperately needing a blessing, he couldn't say the word. It got stuck in his throat. He couldn't utter it. Once again, he thought he heard a voice saying, "You cannot sleep anymore. Macbeth has murdered sleep, the innocent sleep that gives life nourishment." The voice echoed throughout the entire house, repeating, "You cannot sleep anymore. Glamis has murdered sleep, and Cotter won't sleep anymore. Macbeth won't sleep anymore." Disturbed by horrifying thoughts, Macbeth went back to his wife, who suspected that he had failed in his mission and that their plan had been ruined. He was in such a distressed state that she scolded him for lacking determination. After she found that he killed the king, she told him to wash his hands stained with blood. Meanwhile, she took his dagger and planned to smear the faces of the soldier attendants with blood to make them look guilty. Morning came, and the murder was discovered, unable to be hidden. Although Macbeth and his wife pretended to be grief-stricken and presented convincing evidence against the attendants, which included the dagger and their bloody faces, suspicions ultimately fell on Macbeth himself. Macbeth's motives for the crime were much stronger than those of the weak-minded attendants. King Duncan's two sons fled. The eldest son, Malcolm, sought refuge in the English court, while the younger son, Denalban, escaped to Ireland. With the rightful heirs to the throne gone, Macbeth, as the next in line, was crowned king, fulfilling the literal prediction of the strange sisters. Despite their newfound power, Macbeth and his queen couldn't forget the prophecy that their own lineage wouldn't inherit the throne, but rather the descendants of Banquo. Realizing that they had stained their hands with blood and committed terrible crimes just to secure the throne, for Banquo's descendants tormented them. They decided to get rid of both Banquo and his son to prevent the prophecy of the strange figures from coming true again. To achieve this, they organized a grand feast and invited all the important nobles, including Banquo and his son Flens, treating them with special courtesy. Macbeth arranged for murderers to ambush Banquo on his way to the palace that night. Banquo was stabbed to death. However, Flens managed to escape during the chaos. It was from Flens' descendants that a line of kings would eventually rise to the Scottish throne, later uniting the crowns of England and Scotland. During the banquet, the Queen acted graciously and hospitably, impressing everyone with her royal manners. Macbeth talked with his local governors and nobles, pretending he wanted Banquo to join them. Just as he said this, the ghost of Banquo, whom Macbeth had ordered to be killed, entered the room and sat in the chair meant for Macbeth. Although Macbeth was usually brave and fearless, he turned pale with terror and couldn't move. His eyes fixed on the ghost. His queen and the nobles couldn't see the ghost but noticed Macbeth staring intensely at an empty chair. They thought he was going mad. She whispered to him, reminding him of the hallucination of a floating dagger he had seen before killing King Duncan. But Macbeth continued to see the ghost and didn't pay attention to his wife's words. He spoke incoherently and almost revealed things he shouldn't have. Afraid that their terrible secret would be exposed, the Queen quickly dismissed the guests, explaining Macbeth's behavior as a recurring illness. Macbeth and his queen were tormented by horrible thoughts. They both had restless nights filled with terrible dreams. The fact that Banquo's son, Flens, had escaped troubled them greatly. They feared that Flens would have children who would become kings and prevent Macbeth's own descendants from inheriting the throne. These miserable thoughts haunted them relentlessly, and Macbeth decided to seek out the weird figures again to learn more about the future. He found them in a cave on the heath. They already knew he was coming because of their foresight. They were performing dark spells and summoning evil spirits to reveal the future. Their ingredients included toads, bats, snakes, dog tongues, lizard legs, owl wings, dragon scales, and the finger of a dead child. They boiled all these ingredients in a large pot and cooled it with animal blood whenever it got too hot. They added the blood of a sow that had eaten her own babies and the grease that had dripped from a murderer's gallows. Through these rituals, they bound the evil spirits to answer their questions. The weird sisters asked Macbeth if he wanted their master's spirits to answer his doubts. Macbeth wasn't scared by the frightening rituals he witnessed. He fearlessly said, "Where are they? Show them to me." The three spirits appeared one after another. The first one took the form of a head wearing armor. It called Macbeth by name and warned him to be cautious of Macduff, the governor of Fife. Macbeth thanked the spirit for the warning, as he had already suspected Macduff. Next, a second spirit appeared as a bloody child. It addressed Macbeth by name and reassured him, saying he shouldn't fear anyone because no one born from a woman could harm him. It encouraged him to be strong, ruthless, and determined. Macbeth exclaimed, "Macduff, why should I fear you? But just to be sure, you won't live either. I will eliminate any doubt or threat." After dismissing that spirit, a third one appeared as a child wearing a crown and holding a tree. It called Macbeth by name and comforted him, saying he wouldn't be defeated until Burnham Forest moved to his castle hill. Delighted by this prophecy, Macbeth said, "Great signs. Wonderful. Who can uproot a forest and move it?" After leaving the witch's cave, Macbeth received news that Macduff, the governor of Fife, had fled to England to join forces with Malcolm, the rightful heir to the throne. They planned to overthrow Macbeth and put Malcolm in the position of king. Macbeth was furious and attacked Macduff's castle. Macbeth brutally killed Macduff's wife, children, and anyone connected to him. These terrible actions turned Macbeth's top nobles against him. Many joined Malcolm and Macduff, who were gathering a strong army in England. Others secretly supported them but were too scared of Macbeth to openly show it. Macbeth struggled to recruit new followers because everyone despised him. Now no one loved or respected him. He had nobody to care for or trust. Macbeth began to envy the peaceful rest of Duncan, the king he had murdered. Duncan remained undisturbed in his grave, safe from harm and threats. During this time, the queen, who had willingly participated in their evil deeds, took her own life. Overwhelmed by guilt and the public's hatred, she couldn't bear the weight of her actions. Her death left Macbeth completely alone, without anyone to love, care for, or confide in. He became indifferent to life and wished for death. Hearing Malcolm's army approaching, Macbeth regained a hint of his former courage. He decided he would die wearing his armor. He still held on to the deceptive promises of the witches. He remembered their prophecies that he couldn't be harmed by anyone born of a woman, and that he would be invincible until Burnham Forest moved to his castle hill. He believed these events were impossible. So, Macbeth locked himself inside his castle, thinking it was impenetrable and safe from a siege. He grimly waited for Malcolm's arrival. One day, a messenger arrived, frightened and pale. He could barely speak about what he had seen. The messenger claimed that while watching on a hill, he witnessed Burnham Forest come alive and move. Macbeth got furious and threatened to hang the messenger if he was lying. Doubt crept into his heart. He began to question the vague words of the spirits. He wasn't supposed to fear until Burnham Forest reached his castle hill. Now it seemed like the forest was actually moving. Still, he declared that if the messenger spoke the truth, they should prepare for battle. There was no escape or hiding. Macbeth expressed his weariness of life and his desire for it to end. With these desperate words, Macbeth faced the approaching army that had reached his castle. The mysterious sight that frightened the messenger had a simple explanation. As the forces marched through Burnham Forest, Malcolm instructed each soldier to cut a branch and carry it in front of them. This tactic aimed to hide the true size of their army. Seeing soldiers approaching with branches created the illusion of a moving forest. The words of the spirits came true, but in a different way than Macbeth had thought. One of his main sources of confidence crumbled. A big fight broke out. Macbeth fought hard even though his supposed allies secretly disliked him and favored Malcolm and Macduff. Macbeth killed anyone who stood against him. Finally, Macbeth faced Macduff in a duel. Macduff had been searching tirelessly for Macbeth and scolded him for killing his family. Macbeth, burdened by the guilt of Macduff's relatives, initially avoided the fight. But Macduff kept provoking him, insulting him and calling him names like a tyrant, murderer, hellhound, and villain. Then Macbeth remembered the spirit's words that no man born of a woman could harm him. Confidently, Macbeth told Macduff that his efforts were useless because he had a special protection that made him invulnerable to harm from ordinary births. But Macduff countered, urging Macbeth to let go of his false sense of security. He revealed that he was not born in the usual way but was untimely ripped from his mother's womb. Upon hearing this, Macbeth's remaining confidence shattered. Macbeth trembled and cursed the deceitful witches and spirits who played with words. He realized that this situation was going to fulfill their promises in literal ways while crushing his hopes. Macbeth refused to fight Macduff. Macduff sneered, "We will display you like a monstrous sight and write on a sign, 'Here people can see the tyrant.'" Macbeth declared, "I won't live to kneel before young Malcolm or endure the curses of the common people." His courage was fueled by desperation. "Even if Burnham Forest has come to my castle hill and you, who were not born of a woman, oppose me, I will fight until the end." With these words of madness, Macbeth attacked Macduff. After a fierce battle, Macduff emerged as the winner. He beheaded Macbeth and presented his head to Malcolm, the rightful king. After being unjustly deprived by Macbeth, Malcolm was in power now. He ascended to the throne amidst the cheers of the nobles and the people.